I told my husband if he sends his daughter to school with poor hygiene as punishment, I will divorce him. He thinks I'm overreacting, but I won't stand by while he humiliates a child just to prove a point. In the quietude of a suburban evening, a young woman named Rachel tended to her garden. She was petite, with auburn hair that caught the last rays of the setting sun, turning it into a fiery halo. Rachel's nimble hands danced among the plants, pruning, watering, and coaxing life out of the rich soil. Her garden was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape from the whirlwind of daily routines and find peace in the rhythms of nature. Rachel's neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, often peeked over the fence to admire the blooms, offering a warm smile and a few words of encouragement. Rachel had moved into the house 3 years ago, bringing with her a green thumb and a gentle spirit that seemed to breathe life into the once dormant patch of earth. She had a way with plants that mirrored her nurturing approach to people. It was a skill she'd picked up from her grandmother, who had taught her that every living thing deserved care and respect. As Rachel knelt beside a bed of daisies, she couldn't help but think of her stepdaughter, Emily. With her father's piercing blue eyes and her mother's unruly hair, Emily had a way of filling any space she occupied with a vibrant energy that was both infectious and challenging. Rachel had known her since she was a toddler, and over the years, she had grown to love her fiercely. But lately, something had shifted in the girl's demeanor, a hardness that Rachel hadn't noticed before. Summary to the power of one: Rachel, a young wife and stepmother, finds solace in her garden, which she has transformed from neglect into a vibrant sanctuary. Her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, appreciates Rachel's green thumb and kind nature. Rachel is concerned about changes in her stepdaughter Emily's behavior, as the girl has grown from a toddler to a young child with a complex personality. Emily's laughter, once a sweet melody that filled the house, had become scarce. Rachel often found her lost in thought, her eyes distant and her smile forced. Rachel had asked her husband, Mark, if he knew what was wrong, but he just shrugged it off, saying she was going through a phase. But Rachel felt it was something more, a storm brewing beneath the surface, threatening to uproot the delicate balance of their blended family. The incident at school had been the first crack in Emily's pristine facade. Rachel had picked her up that afternoon, noticing the redness in her eyes and the way she slumped in the car seat. Emily had mumbled something about a fight with a girl, but Rachel could tell it was more than that. The words lesbian and poor had been thrown around, and Rachel's heart had sunk at the thought of her stepdaughter using such cruel language, but she had to admit, she was equally shocked when Mark had told her his idea for punishment. "You can't do this," Rachel had said, her voice shaking as she faced her husband in the kitchen. "It's not about matching punishments. It's about teaching her empathy and kindness." "It's about consequences," Mark had countered, his jaw set firmly. What she said was wrong, and she needs to understand that words can hurt. The tension between them had thickened, a palpable force that seemed to suck the air out of the room. Rachel knew Mark was stubborn, but she had never seen this side of him before. She felt a sense of desperation rising within her, a fear that the man she'd built a life with could be capable of such a harsh, misguided lesson. "If you go through with this," Rachel continued, her voice now steady, "I will divorce you. I won't have a child in my home treated like that." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt or bluff. Rachel held his gaze, her resolve unwavering. She had drawn a line in the sand, and she wasn't about to let anyone, not even the man she loved, cross it. The air was thick with the scent of conflict, a stark contrast to the sweet floral notes that usually danced through the house from her garden. Rachel's heart was racing, but she knew she had to stand firm for Emily's sake. The stakes had never been higher, and Rachel felt the weight of her words settle heavily on her shoulders. For a moment, Mark looked as though he might argue, but then his expression softened, and he took a deep breath. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll find another way." Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she also knew that this wasn't the end of the conversation. They had to come up with a punishment that would be both effective and fair, something that would help Emily understand the gravity of her words without causing further harm. The next few days were a flurry of discussions and brainstorming sessions. They talked to Emily, trying to get to the root of the issue, to understand what had led her to act out so cruelly. It turned out that the other girl had been spreading rumors about Rachel and her ex-wife, painting a picture of a family that didn't quite fit the cookie-cutter mold of their neighborhood. Rachel felt a pang of sadness for Emily, who was clearly struggling to navigate the choppy waters of adolescence with the added weight of other people's prejudices. Together, they decided on a punishment that involved community service at a local shelter, where Emily could see firsthand what it meant to truly struggle. Rachel hoped that this experience would open her eyes and help her understand the value of empathy. It would also give her a chance to apologize to the girl she had hurt, face to face. Mark agreed, though Rachel could see the reluctance in his eyes. He was a man who believed in eye for an eye justice, but for the sake of their marriage and their daughter, he was willing to compromise. The night before Emily's first day of community service, Rachel sat with her on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the velvet sky. "I know this isn't going to be easy," Rachel said gently, "but I believe you can learn a lot from this, and we're here to support you every step of the way." Emily looked up at her, the hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Thanks, Rachel," she murmured. "I know you guys are just trying to help." Rachel squeezed her hand, feeling a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. As the first light of dawn peeked over the horizon, Rachel stood in the kitchen, her mug of coffee warming her hands. She could hear Mark upstairs, getting ready for work, and Emily in the shower, scrubbing away the last traces of her old behavior. Rachel took a deep breath and steeled herself for the day ahead. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew that together, they could help Emily become the kind, compassionate person she knew she could be. Her thoughts turned to the other girl, Jenny, whose mother she had met by chance at the local grocery store the previous day. Rachel had recognized the woman from the school's parent-teacher meetings and decided to approach her, hoping to offer an apology and perhaps find a way to mend the rift between the two families. To her surprise, Mrs. Taylor had been receptive, her eyes welling up with tears as Rachel had shared her concerns about the girl's behavior. They had agreed to meet later that afternoon, after Emily's shift at the shelter. Rachel had felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement as she prepared for the encounter. She had hoped that by speaking with Mrs. Taylor, they could find a way to address the root of the issue, the casual cruelty that had taken hold of their daughters. As she waited for the doorbell to ring, Rachel's mind raced with possible scenarios, but she knew she had to remain open and honest. When Mrs. Taylor arrived, Rachel ushered her into the living room, where the scent of her garden lingered in the air. The two women sat down on the plush couch, and Rachel began to explain her reasons for reaching out. Mrs. Taylor listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mix of anger and pain. Rachel could see that she was hurting, and she felt a sudden kinship with her, a bond that transcended the conflict between their daughters. As they talked, Rachel learned that Jenny had been dealing with her own set of challenges. Her family had fallen on hard times, and Rachel realized that the girl's spiteful words had been born out of insecurity and a desire to fit in. Mrs. Taylor confessed that she had been too caught up in her own struggles to notice the change in her daughter's behavior. Rachel felt a pang of guilt, knowing that she had been too preoccupied with her own fears to see the signs in Emily as well. The conversation flowed easily, and as they shared stories and experiences, Rachel and Mrs. Taylor found common ground. They laughed at the absurdity of the schoolyard drama and lamented the pressures placed on their children to conform. As the shadows grew long and the sun dipped below the horizon, they hatched a plan. They would work together to organize a community event that would bring their daughters face to face with the people their words had hurt, forcing them to confront their prejudices and the consequences of their actions. The event, a neighborhood potluck with games and activities, was a hit. Rachel watched with a mix of pride and trepidation as Emily and Jenny interacted, tentatively at first, then with growing ease. They talked to the families from the shelter, learning their stories and sharing their own. Rachel saw the walls between them crumble, replaced by a nascent friendship. The evening ended with a sense of camaraderie that Rachel hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of their community. As Rachel tucked Emily into bed that night, she knew that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But she also knew that they had taken the first, crucial steps toward healing. The friendship with Mrs. Taylor had been a gift, one that had allowed her to see beyond the narrow lens of her own family's troubles. And as she kissed her stepdaughter goodnight, Rachel felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all learn from this experience and grow into better, more empathetic people. The following week, Rachel and Mrs. Taylor met again, this time at the local community center. They had decided to start an after-school program that would focus on diversity and inclusivity, aiming to foster a sense of understanding and acceptance among the children in their neighborhood. Rachel had spent hours researching and planning, eager to make a real difference. The room buzzed with excitement as they presented their idea to the board. They talked about workshops and activities that would bring children from different backgrounds together, teaching them about empathy and the importance of kindness. They spoke of guest speakers and field trips that would expose them to the rich tapestry of human experience. And as they spoke, Rachel could feel the energy in the room shift, a collective sigh of relief that someone was finally taking action. The board approved their proposal unanimously, and Rachel felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had a green light to make a change, not just for Emily and Jenny, but for all the children who felt the sting of prejudice and cruelty. The program was named Bridges, a symbol of the connections they hoped to build. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work, reaching out to local businesses for sponsorships and recruiting a team of dedicated volunteers. The first day of the Bridges program was a whirlwind of introductions and icebreaker games. Rachel watched as the children, including Emily and Jenny, tentatively approached each other, unsure of what to expect. But as the days turned into weeks, She saw the barriers between them begin to dissolve. They shared stories and laughter, learned about different cultures and lifestyles, and discovered that their differences were what made them strong. Rachel's heart swelled with pride as she watched her garden of children grow, each one a unique and beautiful blossom. The community took notice, and soon enough, parents began to sign up their children, eager for them to be a part of the positive change. Rachel and Mrs. Taylor became the unsung heroes of the neighborhood, their collaborative efforts a beacon of hope in a world that often felt fractured and cold. And as the program flourished, so too did the bond between the two families, a testament to the power of love and understanding to conquer even the most entrenched of biases. As Rachel drove home that evening, her mind racing with thoughts of the future, she couldn't help but reflect on the twisted path that had led them here. The incident at school had been a dark cloud, but it had also been the catalyst for something beautiful. They had turned a moment of pain into a movement of compassion, a testament to the human capacity for growth and connection. Rachel knew that the road ahead would not be without its bumps, but she felt ready to face it, hand in hand with her newfound ally, Mrs. Taylor. Together, they would continue to cultivate the garden of their community, ensuring that every child had a chance to bloom. The weekend retreat was a tightly kept secret. Rachel had found it online, a program designed to immerse young minds in the principles of social justice and emotional intelligence. She had signed both Emily and Jenny up without their knowledge, hoping that the shared experience would help them understand the impact of their words and actions. As the day of the retreat approached, Rachel felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would the girls be open to this? Would it work? The retreat was held at a serene campground, surrounded by the whispering trees and the gentle chirp of birds. The first day was a blur of icebreakers and team-building exercises. Rachel watched from afar as Emily and Jenny tentatively engaged with the other participants. The facilitators were skilled, weaving lessons of empathy and compassion into games and discussions that had the girls laughing and learning in equal measure. Rachel's heart swelled as she saw them begin to connect, their shared experiences forming a delicate thread between them. On the second day, the activities grew more serious. They talked about the struggles faced by different communities and the importance of using their voices to advocate for those who were marginalized. Rachel held her breath as the facilitator led a conversation about the harmful effects of stereotypes and prejudices. She saw the light bulb moment in Emily's eyes as she realized the pain her words had caused, and the dawning understanding in Jenny's as she recognized her own role in perpetuating the cycle of hurt. The final day of the retreat culminated in a ceremony where each child had the chance to share what they had learned. Rachel's hand trembled as Emily took the stage, her voice clear and strong. She spoke of Rachel and Mrs. Taylor, of their love and guidance, and of the lessons she had learned about acceptance and kindness. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat as Emily turned to Jenny, extending an olive branch of friendship. And then, it was Jenny's turn. Rachel watched as Mrs. Taylor looked on with a proud smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Jenny spoke of her own family's struggles and the hurt she had felt when others made fun of her mother. But she also spoke of the growth she had experienced, the way Emily's cruel words had forced her to confront her own biases and the power of their newfound friendship. As the ceremony concluded, Rachel felt a sense of peace settle over her. The retreat had been a success. The rift between the two families was beginning to heal, and in its place, a bridge was forming, one made of mutual respect and understanding. As the girls hugged, Rachel knew that this was only the beginning of a long and beautiful journey toward true empathy. And as they walked back to the car, hand in hand, Rachel felt a sense of purpose that was as strong as the roots of the garden she tended so carefully. But the drive home was quieter than Rachel had expected. Mark was lost in thought, his eyes focused on the road ahead. Rachel knew that their parenting styles had always differed, but this incident had thrown their differences into stark relief. She had seen the disappointment in his eyes when she'd suggested community service instead of the punishment he'd proposed, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he still didn't fully understand her perspective. That night, as they lay in bed, Rachel decided it was time to address the tension that had grown between them. She rolled over, her voice soft in the darkness. "Mark," she began, "I know we didn't see eye to eye on this, but I think we both want the same thing, for Emily to learn and grow." Mark sighed, his body relaxing slightly. "I know you're right, Rach," he said, turning to face her, "but it's hard to watch her go through this, especially when I know it's because of me." Rachel reached out, her hand finding his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's not just about you," Rachel said, her voice soothing. "It's about us, as a family, and the kind of people we want to raise." Mark nodded, his eyes searching hers. "I just don't want her to think that because someone's different, it's okay to hurt them." Rachel felt a lump in her throat, her love for Mark swelling alongside her love for their daughters. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and Mark found themselves in deep, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about their values and how they wanted to shape their daughters' futures. Rachel spoke of her belief in the power of kindness and understanding, while Mark grappled with his own need for justice and the lessons he'd learned from his own strict upbringing. They challenged each other, listened, and grew, their bond stretching and strengthening like the branches of a mighty oak. Through it all, Rachel's garden remained a constant. She tended to it with a newfound appreciation for the way it mirrored her family, beautiful, complex, and full of potential. Each plant represented a member of their blended family, growing together despite their differences, reaching for the sun. And as the flowers bloomed and the vegetables grew ripe, Rachel knew that their love would nourish them, allowing each one to flourish in their own unique way. The Bridges program grew, and with it, Rachel and Mark's relationship. They had learned to communicate their fears and hopes, to find common ground even in the face of disagreement. The garden of their marriage had faced a storm, but it had emerged stronger, its roots reaching deeper into the soil of shared experience. Rachel knew that their family would face more challenges in the future, but she also knew that with Mark by her side, they could weather any storm. The next day, Rachel and Mark sat in the garden, their daughters playing nearby. The scent of lavender filled the air, a soothing balm to their weary souls. Rachel looked up at Mark, her heart full. "Thank you," she said simply, "for listening, for growing, for being the man I know you are." Mark's smile was warm, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thank you for being the woman I always knew you were," he replied, taking her hand, "for teaching me to see beyond the thorns and into the heart of the rose." Rachel leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, and they watched as the girls' laughter danced on the breeze. They were a family, bound not just by blood but by love and the shared commitment to nurture the garden of their hearts, to help each other grow into the people they were meant to be. And Rachel knew, without a doubt, that together, they could conquer any challenge that came their way. The trip Rachel had in mind was a radical idea, but one she hoped would be the key to unlocking a deeper level of empathy in her daughters. She'd heard of a small, impoverished village in a nearby state, where families lived without running water or electricity, and children walked miles to attend school. It was a stark contrast to their own lives of comfort and convenience, and Rachel believed that experiencing this reality would be the most profound lesson they could ever receive. Without saying a word, Rachel began to plan. She researched the area, found a reputable organization that arranged such visits, and approached Mark with her idea. He was skeptical at first, his protective instincts flaring at the thought of their daughters being exposed to such hardship. But Rachel was insistent, her eyes shining with a quiet determination that he hadn't seen in a long time. Slowly, he began to see the value in her plan, and together, they decided to take the leap. The day of the trip arrived, and Rachel's stomach was a tapestry of nerves and excitement. They packed lightly, leaving behind the trappings of their privileged lives. As they drove, the scenery shifted from manicured lawns to fields of tall grass, the horizon stretching out before them like an open book. The girls chatted in the back seat, oblivious to the monumental journey they were about to embark on. Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes on the road ahead, her heart in her throat. When they reached the village, the impact was immediate. The stark reality of poverty washed over them like a cold rain, and Rachel felt her daughter's eyes widen in disbelief. They were greeted by a chorus of smiling faces and outstretched hands, a stark reminder that happiness could bloom even in the harshest of climates. For the next few days, they would live among these families, sharing meals, working alongside them, and listening to their stories. Rachel hoped that by the end of the trip, Emily and Jenny would understand that wealth wasn't measured by material possessions but by the richness of the human spirit. The first night was difficult. The girls complained of the hard beds and the strange sounds that filled the night. Rachel held her tongue, knowing that this discomfort was a small price to pay for the lessons they would soon learn. As they lay down to sleep, Rachel whispered a prayer of gratitude for the opportunity to show her daughters the true meaning of compassion. The following days were a blur of activity. They helped to build a well, played with the village children, and assisted in the planting of a communal garden. Rachel watched as her daughters' eyes were opened to the struggles of others, their laughter mixing with the chorus of the villagers. And as the days grew shorter, Rachel saw a softening in Emily, a gentle blooming of understanding that filled her with hope. One evening, as they sat around a crackling fire, Rachel told them a story. It was about a garden that had once been filled with only one type of flower, and how, when a storm had come, it had been destroyed. But when the gardener had replanted, she had chosen a variety of seeds, knowing that diversity made the garden stronger. The analogy wasn't lost on the girls, who exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Rachel felt a warmth spread through her, knowing that the seeds of empathy had been planted. On their final night, Rachel and Mark took their daughters aside. "This trip isn't just about punishment," Rachel said, her voice low and earnest. "It's about learning to see the world through different eyes, to understand that everyone has a story, and that no one deserves to be judged by the clothes they wear or the house they live in." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I get it," she said. her voice small but earnest. "I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't know." Rachel's heart swelled with love and pride as she pulled her close. Jenny spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been thinking about what you said, Rachel. Maybe if I'd understood that everyone has their own struggles, I wouldn't have been so mean to people." Rachel reached out, her hand resting gently on Jenny's shoulder. "You're learning," Rachel said, her eyes misty with pride, as she watched the two girls help each other up the steep hill to the village school. Emily, who had once used her words as weapons, was now using them to lift Jenny's spirits, sharing her own experiences of being the new kid with two moms. Jenny, whose words had once been sharper than thorns, now offered them as gentle encouragement, making Emily feel seen and heard in a way she never had before. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing day, a bond forged in the fires of shared adversity. They saw each other not as adversaries but as allies, two flowers growing from different gardens but reaching for the same sun. Rachel and Mark could see the transformation in their daughters, the way their hearts had expanded to hold more love, more empathy. Back at school, the whispers and glances grew less frequent. The other kids had noticed the change in Emily and Jenny, the way they stood up for each other, the way their friendship had become a force to be reckoned with. Rachel watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with joy, as they turned their newfound empathy into action. They stood up to the bullies, their voices clear and strong, and soon, others began to follow their lead. The Bridges program had been the catalyst for this transformation, but it was their experience in the village that had truly set it in motion. Rachel knew that the real work was only just beginning, that the seeds of kindness they had planted would need constant tending to grow into strong, unyielding trees. But she also knew that with Mark by her side, and with the love and support of their daughters, they could face any storm. The day of their return home was bittersweet. As they packed their bags, Rachel saw the reluctance in the girls' eyes, the way they clung to the moments they had shared. But she also saw a newfound strength, a spark of something that couldn't be extinguished by the cold winds of reality. They had learned that empathy was not a one-time event, but a lifelong commitment. As they drove back, Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The trip had not only brought her daughters closer but it also opened their eyes to the world beyond their own backyard. They had tasted the bitter fruit of prejudice and had chosen to cultivate a garden of love instead. When they arrived home, Rachel noticed something different in the air. The house, once a battleground for clashing ideals, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where growth and understanding could flourish. She turned to Mark, her heart in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for supporting me, for believing in this." Mark took her hand, his own eyes shining. "Thank you for teaching me," he replied, "for showing me that love is the greatest lesson of all." Their daughters, now friends, walked into the house ahead of them, their laughter echoing through the halls. Rachel knew that the road ahead was still long and winding, but with each other and their newfound empathy, they would navigate it together. The garden of their family had faced its storm, but it had emerged more beautiful than ever before, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring.